Have you ever found yourself watching episode 1 and thought, wait, why is Naboo ruled by a kid? Why would a planet be like, yeah, let's have a 14-year-old make our decisions? Why do they elect such young leaders without even being part of a royal bloodline? And no, it's not just because Padmé needed to be somewhat close in age to Anakin. Well, although they do need to be close in age, could there also be an actual in-universe rhyme and reason as to why Naboo elects young people to rule at their highest level of government? You know, when it comes to the issue of young characters in The Phantom Menace, it's usually always Anakin who is the focus of discussion and debate. But I think there's also an equal significance to having Amidala being a 14-year-old, and the Queen at that. And this is a significance that kills many birds with one stone. For starters, by standing in juxtaposition to the core issue of how the Republic got to the point it did, and going right to the heart of the problem, while also enhancing and fitting into Lucas's themes. And I think it's a pretty bold and innovative idea. So, let's see what we find when we take a closer look. By the time of The Phantom Menace, the Republic's Senate has been rotting from the inside. It has become overrun by career politicians, whom have grown greedy and self-serving over their decades in office. Their power ensured by special interest groups, who have been lining their pockets. And while some bureaucracy can be necessary in a governing system, the Senate has reached a point of excess. This and the self-serving status quo has become the accepted norm, which has created a dysfunctional, clogged system, incapable of achieving very much in the actual interest of the people. It has become lost. And this is something that could eventually happen to almost any ruling societal system. Yes, we're talking about corruption. And it is this corruption in the Galactic Senate which the Sith could take full advantage of to accomplish their own ends. So, could there be any sort of solution to prevent this corruption, or keep it to a manageable minimum? Is there a way for society to elect leaders that will be untainted by corruption? Perhaps Lucas has a suggestion. Perhaps there are alternatives for a society to have leaders who have never had the opportunity to develop any of these corrupting ties. Leaders that only serve short terms and typically have short careers. Young people. Bright, gifted, natural leader types, of course, with a strong moral integrity, but fresh and focused and selflessly committed to doing only what's right for the people, surrounded by a council of wise, experienced advisors, of course, but still given the final say.
A course of action that will lead us to war.
So why would Naboo take such an awful risk on this unique system of electing young monarchs? Sure, there's the risk of a bit of naivete that would definitely come with it, and maybe some impulsiveness. But on the flip side, there's a whole other host of benefits and advantages that young people can bring. For starters, they've still got a whole other level of passion and wholehearted idealism. So, find some that are motivated by pure and genuine intentions, with a keen drive to persevere in doing only what's right for the greater good of everyone, rather than looking out for their own personal interests. This will go a long way in keeping the top leadership position as relatively free of corruption as one could hope. And I think another advantage young rulers would bring to the table is, with their fresh perspectives, they're usually better at thinking outside the box and finding solutions and solving problems that more institutionalized adults might miss. This sounds hard to pull off, to be sure, youthful idealism is not always guaranteed to be an asset. It can also sometimes be a liability. But this is the system the people of Naboo in particular seem to have felt was worth experimenting with, and it's the system they have come to prefer. As a society, the Naboo value art and beauty and nature, and investing their trust in the pure intentions and sincerity of youth appears to be a key component part of their culture. So, has this been a wise choice that has paid off? A good test would be to take a look at how all of this plays out during Naboo's biggest crisis, which was under the leadership of Queen Amidala. Was she able to follow through and fulfill their expectations and deliver on their trust in her? Let's run through it. The Trade Federation sets up a blockade around Naboo, but Amidala keeps her wits about her, relying on ambassadors to settle things through negotiations. The negotiations never take place, and the Trade Federation then proceeds to establish a military occupation on the planet's surface. During the invasion, her advisors suggest surrendering, which is unfortunate. But given the circumstances, it's the obvious and wisest thing to do here. And with her pacifist ideals and not wanting to needlessly put up a doomed fight with her security forces, she agrees. So, we see her maintaining her composure and making sound judgments. So far, so good. Now, Darth Sidious wants the Trade Federation to force Amidala to sign a treaty, which would legalize their invasion, thus making the Senate look ineffectual, which would reflect poorly on Chancellor Valorum. Newt Gunray tries to coerce Amidala into signing the treaty, with the threat of causing suffering to her people as leverage. Sidious thinks Amidala's youthfulness will make her easy to control, but instead she proves herself to be resilient. Signing the treaty might have sounded like a sensible choice in order to prevent any harm to her people, but Padmé knows she can't trust the Trade Federation, and that while not signing the treaty would lead to more suffering for her people in the short term, she sticks to her guns with the hope that a way out of this crisis will present itself. And she knows that things will be much worse if she does sign it, so she stands firm in her principles. The Jedi rescue the Queen and her entourage while on their way to a detention camp. Her advisors and the Jedi suggest she head to Coruscant and plead her case to the Senate. Torn between that and remaining with her people through their tribulations, she agrees the most effective thing, ideally, will be to address the Senate. Their ship is damaged in the escape, and they're forced to land on a dicey, backwater planet to get repairs. Here, our adventurous young queen is insatiably curious about Tatooine, and insists on exploring Mos Espa in person, despite the danger and the heat. Here we also see a little bit of Padmé's naive side, but also her eager willingness to learn as much as she can about other places in the galaxy. This is where she of course meets a young boy named Anakin Skywalker, and forms a bond of friendship with him, as he eventually takes it upon himself to risk his own life to help her cause. And here, Padmé also does a bit of back-talking to Qui-Gon, but in the end, spending all this time with him as a sort of informal mentor is also inspiring her to think even more outside the box, and to take risks on people and things you have faith in when it comes to things like finding creative solutions to life's obstacles and difficult problems. Because, Qui-Gon is the OG when it comes to thinking outside the box and bending rules. So, through it all, I think the two of them find they actually have a lot in common, such as trying things most people wouldn't think are worth trying. Still refusing to bow to the Trade Federation's wishes, Padmé and the gang eventually land on big ol' Coruscant, where Amidala should be able to work on resolving the crisis. But we learn along with Padmé that things here aren't quite working the way they should be, and the situation starts to look hopeless. But Padmé still adamantly refuses to accept Federation control, to sign the treaty, or go to war. Still sticking to her principles, she is committed to giving her pitch to the Senate a college try. Because that's how it should work, right? Sure, fair enough. However, this is where Palpatine was able to use her virtues and strengths, her unwavering devotion to protecting her people, as well as her naivete, to spring his trap and get her to do what he wanted, by suggesting to oust Chancellor Valorum, and thus opening the opportunity for him to take the seat, a pattern Palpatine would use over and over again. So, backed into a corner and desperate to save her people, Amidala had to make a quick decision, and saw it was the only remaining ray of hope for restoring Naboo's freedom and ending their suffering. She was willing to do whatever it took and make whatever sacrifice she had to. Every choice and every sacrifice she has made has always been with the best intentions for her people. And here we see she is poised, bold, and completely capable, presenting in front of the Galactic Senate, fiercely defending the freedom of her people in the arena that should have been there for them, but quickly seeing for herself the broken and inert system for what it is. She becomes disillusioned with the Senate. But remaining strong, she doesn't conform or comply with procedures, or relent to a commission, but instead does what she thinks is best for her people. And even though she personally doesn't want to remove Valorum, she justifies it as the only hope in saving her planet. Unbeknownst to her, it turns out by doing this, the Sith Lord has flipped her strengths into a liability, all to his advantage, which is unfortunate, and many watching the film know this. But can our young, valiant queen redeem herself? So, she's already ousted Valorum, so just wait for the new Chancellor to begin setting things right? No need to go do anything rash and risky, right? No, for every minute that goes by while waiting for the gears of the Senate to turn, more of her people suffer. So, stuck in a sit-and-wait situation, the Queen goes deep into thought over the fate of her planet, determined to think of some way to save it. Yet, through all of this, she lets the likes of her newfound clumsy Gungan friend just hang out with her, because she's cool like that. And here's where one simple remark of sympathy from a socially inept misfit inspires our young hero towards a speedier solution, and she goes for it. Now, with a plan brewing in her mind, this is also when we see Padmé ignoring counsel from every point, and stubbornly doing things her own way. And how many teenagers do we know like that?
Need your help.
And even entertaining the thought of trying to ask the Gungans for help? I wouldn't think an older leader would have gone that far out on a limb, thinking there would be no way the Gungans would possibly agree, because the long-standing rift between the two societies was too great, let alone humble themselves before Boss Nass while breaking decoy protocol? And infiltrating the palace with a small team of guards? Only a brash young mind would be so bold. This is the biggest example of her youthful impulsiveness being flipped from a liability into an asset. And here we also see, when faced with a dilemma, she goes against her original principles of not going to war. But for the greater good, she did what she had to, as it was the only solution. And the alternatives were worse. So, thanks to Padmé's spunky idealism and bull-headed determination to assert her own agency, she goes way further out on a limb than I'd wager most older people would have, to try to ask for help from the Gungans and offering an alliance to take back the planet for all its inhabitants. And it won the day. And this all goes back to the recurring themes in Star Wars of heroic deeds coming from the least expected places, and the theme of symbiosis. Padmé took some great risks and had some bold ideas, and thanks to everyone's help, she succeeded.
Now, Viceroy, we will discuss a new treaty.
Her people had faith in her and trusted her judgment, and it looks like it paid off. Well, you know, for the most part. I think Padmé's youthful idealism is constantly driving her arc and affecting the plot through to the end, whether for good or bad, which of course is another running theme of Episode 1. Star Wars has always been a kids' film series, but this was the first time it had kids as the main characters. And Episode 1 is an empowering movie for kids, and Amidala is an empowering role model, showing us all that kids are not to be underestimated. They're capable of amazing things if you give them the chance and show them trust. Sometimes adults suck, and sometimes we all need to get back in touch with our innocence and purity and determination to do the right thing. One of the many great things about Star Wars is it reminds us to keep that mind of a child, to look at things from a fresh perspective, and to never forget our own inner child, that one who thinks outside the box.
Blah, 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 blah.
So, would you want a 14-year-old running your country? Would the pros outweigh the cons? Is it practical? Share your thoughts.